hello to our Keynotes 2022. This interview we are having in this session is about implementing PlantTools at NNE and how it came about. My name is Carsten Beinecke, and first I want to give just a few words to our company before we then switch over to my interview partner and NNE. So Auxalia has more than 30 years of experience with Autodesk products. We have over 4,600 customers globally, not just here in the German-speaking area. And we have over 70 employees and 9 offices throughout the German-speaking countries here in Europe. Yeah, more and more people. Yeah, I said already, my name is Carsten Beinecke. I'm the product manager of PlantTools, and I'm also responsible for consulting and helping our plant customers to find solutions for their requirements. And now I will move over so you can see us. So and now last team, oops, where is it? Eriksen can say a few words about himself. Oops.
Yeah, well, my name is Lars Team and I work at NNE here in Denmark. I have been for the company for 20 years and I have always been a part of the support team for our CAD systems. So I have been, you can say, on the journey for the development of CAD systems. So from started, yes, 20 years ago and until where we are today.
Okay. And the next slide. So this is our agenda. We want to talk, or Lars will talk a little bit about NNE and what they are doing. Then we will talk about how NNE learned about Auxalia and the PlantTools. Then we talk about specifically how the process of development and delivery of the development was working. And then we have a short list of the development we actually did. And then at the end, there is time for a bit Q&A, depending on how many questions you have. Okay, so Lars, so what does NNE do and in which industries does NNE work in? And where are your locations where you do your engineering?
Yeah, well, NNE is an international consulting company, and we are highly specialized in the pharma engineering. You can say that in NNE we are building greenfield and brownfield pharma manufacturing facilities for our customers, and it's primarily here in DK in Denmark, but we also do some building in the US. So for now we are a little over 1,300 people or professionals here in NNE worldwide.
Okay.
And NNE is owned by Novo Nordisk, which is a fairly large company here in Denmark. So the most of our projects, the majority of our project is done for Novo Nordisk. So we want to be a kind of front runner for the pharma engineering technologies. So for this purpose, we use, of course, different softwares like CAD and stuff like that. So so when you ask in which industries does NNE work, it's only in pharma engineering.
Okay.
Pharma engineering. We don't do much else. We have tried other branches as well, but the pharma engineering is where we are specialized and we are very good at our jobs.
Yeah. Okay. What I can already say is that the requirements NNE had in regards to PlantTools and what they needed in regards to development for PlantTools is not specific. This is what I can say because I have a broader customer base. it's not really specific to the pharma industry. It's just that this is the industry NNE is working on, working in, or working for. Okay, yeah. So how? Yeah.
Yeah, our locations. Yeah, we are actually located here in Denmark, of course. And we also have office in US, and then we have an office in India. And our Indian office is mainly our design office, where we do a lot of 3D design and P&D, a lot of CAD design in general.
Okay. So yeah, I was a little bit too fast, so I did not want to do that. Sorry. I will enlarge you in a moment. So the next point on the agenda is how did you learn about auxalia and PlantTools? Maybe you can say a little bit about.
Yeah, well, previous time we used AutoCAD Plant from Rabies. It was called Rabies at that time. And then the AutoCAD Plant was sold to Bentley Systems back in, I think it was about 2010, something like that. And then Bentley actually told us, I think they told all customers that they didn't want to develop further on AutoCAD in the future. So we didn't want to stick to AutoCAD. We needed some systems that could be developed in some extent. So we start looking into other plant systems, and we found the AutoCAD Plant was a system that was suitable for our company. So in 2014, we started to use AutoCAD Plant, and we want to use Plant both for P&D and also for 3D.
Yeah, Lars, I have a little request. If you could speak up a little bit louder. I have at least one attendee who says if you could talk a little bit louder, maybe that's. So I also have to say NNE cannot use GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, so we use Teams, and this is why it's a little bit confusing with the MS Teams meeting window here within the webinar. So okay.
Yeah, I will try to move my microphone so it will be a little closer. So I hope this is.
Yeah, it's a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah. But back in 2014, we got this new software, and at that time we also needed a data management software. So at the same time, we got auxalia. auxalia is maybe not that known, but it's actually a pretty good and advanced data management tool. You can say that's where we actually start looking into, are there any way where we can customize the PlantTools, AutoCAD Plant? And we came across what was called AC PlantTools at that time, or just PlantTools, I can't recall.
Yeah,
quite.
Just PlantTools, yeah.
Yeah, PlantTools. And we found some of the tools. I think we looked into the data manager, we looked into some other, I can't recall 100% what it was, but it looked actually pretty interesting. But we also choose to run with Vault, meaning that we also use Vault in our setup. And at that time, you could see that it was not supporting Vault, so we just postponed it, say, okay, this is not now, we need to look into this. So many years later, 2018, 19, I think it was, we were starting in our company NNE to focus even more at the digitalization. And one of our key drivers here was that we needed a more data consistency in our projects. So data consistency was a big topic, and I remember I started to write some mails to, I think it was CAD Studio at that time.
Yeah.
And where we were asking, how about the inline instruments? How about Vault? Will there be any support in the future on these parts? And for the inline instruments, we or you said that it was planned. So in the future, you might implement this in your tool in Plant Spectrum, because it was Plant Spectrum was using or was intended to use. And also for the Vault, you told us that you didn't have any plans for Vault, but maybe you could help us customize
okay.
Vault like that. So that was our first touch with you, so to speak. And from there, we actually, I think it was a year after, I think we had a conversation and we talked about what was the possibilities. Could we actually get some help with developing? And I think actually we then discussed another meeting, and then we had also to align with our management inside in NNE, and I think we again made a little forth and back. So that's I think
several emails and calls.
Yeah. So and then of course we check the functionality also to figure out is this functionality something we can use. So yeah, I think that's pretty much that.
Okay. Yeah. Did you recall how you found us, or how did you find PlantTools? Did you go through the App Store or some other means? Would be.
Yeah, well, I think the story is we try to use Plant. Plant have this functionality called line list, where you also can get information from the PID, and with the right setup, you can also get the information and start doing the 3D from data directly. It's kind of the same way it works like Plant Spectrum, but when we have tried that, we tried it in one project, we figured out it was not enough.
Yeah.
It needed to be even more better, especially for the data checking, the validation of data.
Yeah.
When you run a validation in the plant in this line list functionality, it takes very long time.
Yeah.
And we figured that this product here, actually, it could do it, you can say, real time. And I think to remember, we found it because we then searched for some tools, some other stuff that actually was, you can say, supporting the way we want to work. Okay. And I think to remember, we found it at Autodesk homepage in a forum, something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so somebody told us, well, you could try looking into this tool, and maybe this tool could do what you actually were looking for. Yeah,
I actually have a good friend and customer who is also in that meeting, Greg Wood from CRB, who I did the interview with last year, and he is also active in the mostly in the P90 forum. And he sometimes, if there is something you cannot do with Plant 3D, then he points out to PlantTools. So that is a very, and CRB is a very a customer who not only uses a lot of licenses, but also pushes the development of PlantTools forward tremendously. Okay, so I want to mention one thing which Lars, I'm doing too much configuration, which Lars referred to, and that is the spec-driven mode of Plant 3D. That came with Plant 3D 2017.1. But we started with it, or we had Plant Spec-driven, I think, in 2013 or 14, when we developed it with an Austrian customer. And Plant Spec-driven from the very beginning, because the customer had very high demands, is very highly configurable. So all the things almost all the things Lars needed or NNE needed were already in there, with a few exceptions. But the way the spec-driven mode of Plant 3D works, I remember one Autodesk University in Las Vegas, where one of the support people of Autodesk came to us and said, says to me that you cannot use the spec-driven mode of Plant 3D because it's just not good enough. For if you want to go that way to link P&ID and 3D, you just need more features.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also what we figured out.
Yeah. Okay, so the next slide is about how we work together in general with customers in regards to development and delivery of a feature you request. So how this typically works is you maybe we start with the first point. So you as a customer, you have a request for a certain feature or an improvement of an existing feature. And you call us or send us an email, we have a conversation, and this leads to a workshop. So first we get a rough idea about what you try to achieve, what you need. And then we have a workshop where we detail your requirement. This all typically, there are some footnotes. This typically also leads into the decision in which of our 8 plant tools that feature or that function will be implemented. If it's not already an improvement of an existing function, then it's clear. But if it's a new function, then we decide together, okay, in which plant tool would that function fit best. Then, based on your requirement and on the workshop, we write a specification, and it's a specification for a customer, not for a developer. So it's in English, so meaning, or we have a saying in German. So it's anyway. So you can understand what I'm reading there. It describes how the workflow of that function should be. Typically, it contains how the user interface, if needed, looks like, and so on. You check that specification, and you may have you need some clarification. So there is a loop which then details the specification more and more. And at the end, you approve that specification. We send you a quote, and the quote will not cover all the development costs, because when we develop a new feature, it will become part of an existing plant tool. So all customers will have the ability to use that new feature. And that is very often the case. The last big feature we developed, for example, for our customer CRB, which I already mentioned, was the off-page connector manager for P&ID. Or before that, it was a bigger project was the bolt calculation in 3D. So a lot of customers participate on that new feature. So you should not be the person or the company who is paying the full development costs. So that is already considered in the quote we will send you. Then you will send us the PO to develop that. And then there is a small down payment so we can get started. And then we start the development. And depending on the complexity, let's say, or how long a project that is, if it's just a few days of development work, then there may not be a real pre-release. But typically what we will do, we will develop step by step, and we will send you pre-releases so you can test what we already accomplished. Or in addition, we typically also send videos so you can see how that feature so far can be used. And this is also what we did with Lars and his team. So we did go step by step. Continued development, and here we will also get your feedback. So you will get a pre-release. You test that so far and give us feedback, and we will continue with the development, but we will then all incorporate your feedback also, and which leads to the next pre-release and so on. And at the end, there is the final release of the plant tool and the final payment. So this is typically the process for if you need development. A short list of the features we developed for NNE specifically. I already mentioned some other developments we did for example, for INU or for CRB. There's also development for GIA, a lot of customers. By the way, another reason, so there are, let's say, two main reasons we have, or customers have. And I actually did in our last year's keynote, I mentioned that in more detail, but there are two main reasons why customers ask for development. One is they need a certain function, and the other one is they need a certain function, a certain function, let's say right away or pretty soon, because we also have our own to-do list, but often things get pushed back. So if customers want to assure to get a certain function they need pretty soon, then this is also a motivation for customers. Okay, so these are the 4 features we developed for NNE. And the first one, for which I don't have a picture here, is an extension of the assembly function we already had. That's actually a good example of an, let's say, improvement, or in this case, it's more a different workflow of the assembly function. The assembly, so an assembly, what we have in our Plant Express tools, is a function with which you can essentially group or create logical groups in your PNID. You draw a boundary line, a polyline, or a rectangle, and you define this as an assembly, and the parts, the symbols and lines within the boundary, they in the past they could acquire, for example, the tag of the assembly or whatever properties that assembly, which is then also a PNID object, all the features or all the properties you have there could be acquired by the symbols or the lines within the assembly. However, what Lars and his team needed, or NNE, was that you have stacked assemblies. So an assembly and an assembly and an assembly and an assembly. And the reason was that, let's say, if you go from the outside to the inside, the assembly on the outside, everything which is in there will be delivered to the, or will be part of the delivery. And then the next level in there, you have another assembly where you define, okay, everything which is in there should not be part of the delivery. And then there is again another assembly, because that is again excluded and included. So it's really like plus and minus. Or you can maybe with a hedge function of Plant3D with a, I don't know in English, is it island detection or so? So similar to this, and we in this case we couldn't use acquisitions anymore in PNID, but we had to use mapping. So it's just a different way and a more flexible way of using assemblies. The next one, as Lars mentioned, was the support for inline instruments. I have some little screenshot here. So in the past, Plant Spec Driven didn't support the inline instruments class of PNID, because when we developed Plant Spec Driven, the customer with whom we developed Plant Spec Driven didn't use the inline instruments class of PNID. So, and because of time constraints, we skipped that part. But as Lars pointed out, NNE definitely needed that. So now you can use also inline instruments, and you have a little picture here for a safety valve, which is typically an inline instrument under relief valves. And this is how it looks then, for example, in 3D. So this was implemented. And then also the support for Volt. And because Plant Spec Driven uses, has the ability to create, for example, gaskets in P&ID. You see here flanges. The flanges, they appear here as a symbol, but the gaskets do not appear as a symbol. We call that not placed objects in Plant Data Manager or in Plant Spec Driven. And so Plant Spec Driven supports that, but in a Volt project, you have local copies. So we needed to take care of that. And while we did this, we figured out, well, we can also support the BIM projects. So Plant Spec Driven also works with BIM projects in that regard. So we could cover both cases in one go, which was, of course, nice. And then also very important, Lars mentioned that NNE works with auxalia, another Austrian company. And the workflow NNE is using is in a way that the designer draws the P&ID with using Plant Spec Driven, but the typical workflow or use case, or one of the use cases of Plant Spec Driven is if you insert a valve in a pipeline or in a line segment, then Plant Spec Driven wants to assign pipe spec data from your Plant 3D pipe specs. So for example, yeah, you get a selection list, or not a selection list, you get a dialog where you see, okay, these are all the valves in my spec of that line in that size. And then you select whatever valve you want, a 3D valve essentially. But at NNE, the process is a little bit different. Here you draw with Plant Spec Driven, and then the assignment of what valve that is done in auxalia, and then it will be imported back into the P&ID. So all the dialog boxes, Plant Spec Driven, popped up, were very annoying to the user because he didn't need to assign any catalog data. So we made all these dialog boxes suppressible. And while we are on it, I had some ideas for other dialogues I wanted to suppress, so we added that as well. You can disable or enable these dialog boxes in the settings of Plant Spec Driven. Okay, I have one question. So now it would be, I will bring back, now that I talk, I will bring back Lars, and now it's time for Q&A, and I have the first one. Is the Plant Spec Driven only working with the PlantTools in BIM projects and not with the default AutoCAD Plant 3D settings? Is that correct? Yes. So the Spec Driven mode you can activate in Plant 3D has nothing to do with Plant Spec Driven. As I said, Plant Spec Driven was, we started, or we had the first version in 2013 or 2014. I think, anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's a long time ago. And that was way before Autodesk added the Spec Driven mode in Plant 3D 2017.1. So there is no, it does not, Plant Spec Driven does not use anything of the Spec Driven mode of Plant 3D. However, in regards to, because it's now here specifically about BIM project, and this in itself is not really, has nothing to do with BIM, whether or not Plant Spec Driven would use the Spec Driven mode or features of the Spec Driven mode or not. But in regards to BIM projects, as I mentioned in the slide before, when we adapted Plant Spec Driven for Volt for NNE, we figured out, we found actually a better solution than what we originally wrote in the specification to NNE. And because of that new approach, we were also able to handle Plant Spec Driven projects using BIM, or using BIM projects with Plant Spec Driven. And this has mostly to do, or only to do, with these so-called not placed objects, these gaskets and so on, where there is no graphic. We store them, or in the past, we stored these objects in our separate database. But with BIM, that's not really possible, because you cannot check in and check out your own database. And even if that would be possible, yeah, I digress. It's not so. It's not possible with a BIM project. However, so now what we did, we have these not placed objects, these data in the P90 database, and they will be handled by Plant 3D. The data will be checked in and checked out, so we don't have any issues with BIM projects with Plant Spec driven anymore. Okay. By the way, if there are more technical questions or so, yeah, just send us or send me an email. Most of you already have my email address. Otherwise, just get in. We have our form on our homepage where you can get in touch with us as well. Any more questions? Actually, we are right on time. Yeah, while maybe you think about some questions, otherwise I have one more slide or two more. Yeah, just a list of our PlantTools. I don't want to say anything about it. Some of you already know them. Otherwise, you can go to our homepage. If you switch to English and go to, yeah, you see the link below, but just switch to English, and then you find our PlantTools. Again, we have 8 different PlantTools, and the ones NNE is using are Plant Express tools and Plant Spec driven. And yeah, I had a session in German in the morning where I talked about a little bit what PlantTools can do for you. And well, this is in German here. This is in case some of you speak German. There are some more sessions tomorrow till yeah, the last one is at 11:30 from my colleagues. If you are interested here, you can still register and participate on these sessions as well. Okay, so then I say thank you for your attention, and I hope you were able to. Oh, there is one more question. Do all your tools work with BIM? Okay, yeah. So currently, Plant Spec driven is adapted. However, I'm supposed to get a version of our Plant Data Manager today from a developer, which I then can test, which also works with BIM 360 or Autodesk Construction Cloud, to be more precise. And the other tools, or my other developer, or one of my other developers, is currently adapting all the other Plant tools. We are almost there, and then all other Plant tools will also work with BIM or Autodesk Construction or ACC projects. So give us a few more weeks, and then all Plant tools will be available. So the sessions, there's a question. Oops, sorry, I wanted to actually go back. So, and now you have a dark. Can I go back? Yeah. So these sessions, I'm the only person who does English sessions at all. So these sessions will only be available in German. My session here is actually in these 2.5 days the only one in English. So the answer is for those sessions here is no. How can we see other webinars? Is there a link? Yeah, if you go to our auxalia homepage, there is on the very first site, you will see Keynotes 2022, and there you can register for these sessions here. Today is the last session I have. So just go to auxalia.com, and then you will see there is a link to the Keynotes 2022. Oh, now your sessions are possible in English. How can we see? Yeah, no, that is actually all the questions. Okay, if you have any more questions, then please send us an email. You can go through our homepage. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed that session and you could take you learned something from it. And yeah, have a nice day for the rest of the day. And thanks again to Lars for helping with that interview. And yeah, also for you, a nice day. Okay, bye.